at how laws are made in this country, there are three distinct things that happen when a law gets made. First is the identification that there is a need for a law. Right? Now, let's take, for example, we as a country decide that jumping a red light is a bigger crime, right? And currently, if there's a punishment for 100 rupees, to deter people from jumping red lights and endangering the lives of their fellow citizens, a higher penalty should be provided. So the first thing that happens is what is called the pre-legislative stage. In the pre-legislative stage, the government, identifies a gap, either in a legal system or in a policy space, and then puts together a proposal to fill that gap. So, for example, in this case, if we want to, prevent people from jumping red lights, and the government thinks that the solution can be a higher penalty to penalize people so that they don't do it, then they'll put a format of that, and they'll put their proposal in the public domain. So it's called a draft bill. And then individual citizens like you and me will go ahead and give a comment on the draft bill. The government then goes ahead, incorporates those comments, listens to other stakeholders also, and then gives a shape to that bill, and then takes it to the cabinet. Now, the cabinet is the highest decision making authority in the government. Every legislative proposal that has to go to parliament has to be first approved by cabinet. So step one, pre-legislative stage, there is a draft bill. Draft bill goes to the cabinet. The cabinet agrees that yes, this is an important bill and needs to be taken to parliament. Then the bill gets introduced in parliament. Now, as you know, our parliament has two houses, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, and whichever minister is piloting that piece of legislation or that piece of bill can introduce that bill in either houses of parliament. And I'll talk a little bit about the significance of the two houses, a little later. When a bill gets introduced, in the house, the minister actually stands up and says, I want to introduce this bill, and then the house has to agree to that introduction. Very often, if other members of parliament disagree to its introduction, they can oppose the introduction. And whether the bill gets introduced or does not get introduced depends on how many votes are cast either in favor of the introduction or in opposition to the introduction. Now, after the bill gets introduced, there are two pathways that it can take. One, it can straight away be taken up for discussion either on the same day or the next day. But another important pathway that it could take is, if a bill is a technical subject, it might be referred to a parliamentary committee that will then examine that bill in detail. Very often what happens is, if it's a technical subject, the bill will get referred to a parliamentary committee. We've been talking about, road safety. The bill, the Motor Vehicles Amendment Bill, was referred to a parliamentary standing committee during the 16th Lok Sabha. Now, when it gets referred to a standing committee, then the progress of the bill for a little while gets paused till the time the parliamentary standing committee gives its report. When the parliamentary standing committee gives its report, then the report is placed before parliament, and members of parliament can read that report and then debate on that bill. Okay, so if you were doing a pathway of the bill gets introduced, it could either go to a parliamentary standing committee or it could go straight into discussion. If it goes to a parliamentary standing committee, after the report comes out, then it comes for discussion. When the bill is being discussed in one house, members of parliament from different political parties stand up, then they talk about the merits of the bill, and they give their ideas about how to either strengthen the bill or their ideas about things that are missing in the bill that needs to be incorporated. The minister in charge of the bill then replies to all the members of parliament. Sometimes he or she may also accept some of the suggestions given by member of parliament and make some amendments in the bill. Then the minister will put that bill to vote, and after the bill is passed by one house, it will then go to the second house of parliament, where the entire process of deliberation and discussion will happen. The only missing piece will be, since a bill has already been examined by a standing committee of parliament, it will not be examined by a standing committee of parliament again. When the bill is passed by the second house of parliament, it will then be given to the president for the president's approval. Our constitution requires that every piece of law, made by parliament has to be approved by the president. After the president approves a law, Then the law is published in the Gazette of India. The Gazette of India is online. It's available on egazette.nic.in. And when it is published in the Gazette of India, then the law becomes the law of the land, and it is then our obligation to follow that law. Uh, in this entire process, some bills can move very quickly, other bills could take a lot of time, but all bills have to follow this process, with one exception: a bill relating to money related matters. So, for example, the law to implement GST was a money bill. Now, our constitution also specifies that decisions related to taxation and to issues related to finance are only taken up in the Lok Sabha, which is the directly elected House of Parliament. So, money bills and finance bills do not go to the Rajya Sabha. Another example of that is the budget of this country. The budget of the country, is also in a form of a bill. It's called a finance bill, and the finance bill is only passed by the Lok Sabha. The Rajya Sabha can discuss it, but it cannot make any changes to it. And if for some reason, Rajya Sabha does not return the bill back to Lok Sabha, then it is assumed that after the passage of a certain number of days, that Rajya Sabha's approval has been sought. So this, in short, is how the journey of a bill from, a pre-legislative stage to the legislative stage, which is the stage in Parliament, and then the post-legislative stage where it goes to the President for signing. But Parliament just makes the law, which is the structure of a law. Then there is the operating, aspect of the law. How do you implement the law on the ground? That comes through another piece of legislation that's called delegated legislation, also called as rules and regulations. So after a law has been made and the president has signed it, then the government of India or the respective state governments will make rules for implementation of the law, which will then give you, for example, in the case of a traffic violation, the format of the traffic fine that you'll have to pay, how you will pay it, can you pay it in cash, will you have to pay it in a court, all of those, granular working details will then come through that.